Good afternoon, everyone. As Mr. Wong just said, my name is Jim Dragan. I'm with LA County Environmental Health, and I supervise our Consultative Services unit. Purpose of our unit is to try to help industry with the laws and regulations that we enforce. This is Esther Mu. She works also in Consultative Services with me, and she's here to help us out with answering your questions.
这位是我们办公室的主任，他叫 Dragan， 然后我们是在 Consultative Services， 所以今天主要就是跟大家解释一下，就是去年州长签的那个 SB 602的这个法规通过了以后，有一些大家都有一些问题，所以今天我们就可以给大家解答。大家如果有什么问题，等一下可以发问。
September 25th, 2010 is when this law first was passed through our state. It set a starting date of July 1st, 2011, where we would start requiring every food handler within a retail food restaurant to have this certification.
这个法律呢，这个 SB 602呢，是去年9月25号州长签字通过的。那本来是规定说7月1号，今年7月1号开始，所有处理食物的员工，如果是在餐馆工作的话，都需要有一个食品处理许可卡，就是叫做 Food Handler Card。
I wanted to make a clarification because for many years we've had a requirement that each food business was required to have a certified food protection manager. Now we used to call that certification a certified food handler certificate. Now that's changed because there's a new regulation. The old regulation required at least one person per food business that has this certification. Usually it's an 8-hour course, and that person that's certified had the responsibility of overseeing the food operation and training employees within the unit. That requirement still remains the same way it was before, where as a food business you have one person, a minimum of one person that can have that certification and oversee the operation.
以前我们本来有一个叫做 Food Handler Certificate， 那就是每一个餐厅要有一个人有那个卡，有那个证书，然后他的责任就是要负责训练其他的食物处理的人，知道该怎么做。那现在呢，就是我们为了避免这两个有点混淆，所以那个现在叫做食物安全经理证书。所以现在那个还是一样，就是说每一个餐厅要有一个人有，可是现在这个卡呢，这个食品安全卡呢，就是说所有处理食物的人都要有，所以这两个有点不同。
The new regulation that's going to take effect starting July 1st is that all the employees within the facility have kind of a similar training to that of the manager, yet it's not as technical perhaps, a lower level training, but on the same principles of food safety. And it's usually going to be a 2 to 2.5 hour training is what it's designed to be. And that new requirement is called a Certified Food Handler Card. So to avoid confusion, we're going to refer to the manager one as the Certified Food Protection Manager training. And the line employee who works on the line would be the Certified Food Handler training.
现在这个新的法规呢，就是说每一个餐厅里面，如果说他是处理食物，或者他准备食物，或者他搬运，或者说 serve， 就是说端给人家或什么，这些人通通都要有一个食物处理许可卡。那这个叫做 Food Handler Card， 那就跟以前的那一个食物安全经理证书就不太一样，就说两个是不同的。那这个的训练呢，就是大概只有2个小时，大概2个小时多的训练，然后考试也比较轻，比较没有那么技术性的问题。那大概2个半小时，就是说连训练带考试都可以通过，你就可以拿到一个卡。 那以前的那个呢，就是说要有8小时的训练，然后也要通过一个考试，那个考试要送到那个 provider 那里去，让他们评分之后，如果通过，他才给你寄一个 certificate。那现在这个就只是一个卡，所以这个是有一点不同的。
Okay. When SB 602 was passed, that is the law for the Certified Food Handler Certificate, there were some problems in the language of the law. The main issue was that it required an approved test, but it didn't provide a method of a test being approved. So it's very difficult. They wanted to correct that. So a secondary bill was introduced, SB 303. What that bill will do is correct the language in the law. As of today, that law still has not been signed by the governor, that amendment. However, if it does, it will change, it'll clarify the law, and it'll set a standard for the food handler certificate.
这个SB 602就是去年签署了之后呢，就引起了很多问题，就是说谁可以给这些要申请这个 food handler card 的人来训练呢？所以后来就有另外一个就是 SB 303的这么一个提案，那就会规定就是说哪些机构可以给这个训练。所以从今年1月、2月、3月每个月，加州州政府就是那个公共卫生局都有召开会议。那我们老板也去开了几次会，就是大家都提出很多问题，因为大家都搞不太清楚。那现在这个 SB 303呢还没有通，州长还没有签署，所以等他签署之后，可能又会有一点不同。所以我现在在这里给大家看的这些东西呢，你们可以上网去看，就是说可能有一些新的，他们如果有新的什么更改或者什么，会在上面公告。所以我就在在办公室我就把它打好，因为这样大家可以知道到哪里去查这些资料。因为我们一直接到非常多的电话，我知道大家都很关心，然后大家都很想守法，可是有时候不知道应该怎么做。所以为什么今天我们老板来跟大家解释，就是大家等一下有什么问题也都可以问。谢谢。
Okay. So the fact is that this is the current law. The original version is the current law, and it begins July 1st of this year, which is not too far away. And I know a lot of people are concerned because there's been so much confusion back and forth on what do we need to do, where do we get the certificate, what training do we have to take. These are all valid concerns, and although it's still the law, and each jurisdiction, meaning, for instance, Los Angeles County, Orange County, the inspection agency is responsible for enforcement of California code. So the law is in effect. However, with this confusion, the directors for all the jurisdictions in California belong to a group called the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health. And that group has put out a paper where they take a position on the enforcement of it. And what they are recommending to each jurisdiction is to allow for the clarifications to be adopted. That's the SB 303. And they recommend that from July 1st of this year until January 1st of 2012, that the enforcement of the law be limited to education and notification of the requirements for compliance. So in other words, what they are recommending is that we do address it. If you have it, that's great. If you don't, we would address it on the inspection report. But what they're recommending is not to take enforcement action legally. It'd be more of a, you need to have, this is the requirement of the law, you would need to get this corrected. If this new legislation is passed, beginning January 1st, it would be the enforcement of the code.
这个SB 602通过了以后呢，那在今年的4月多，加州那个公共卫生局终于给了我们一个比较清楚的说我们应该怎么做。然后那时候因为他4月多才给我们，那离7月1号已经非常近了，所以他就建议说我们这些不同的 county 的 执法的单位呢，就暂时先不要把大家算成是违规，就是说只是教育大家说要有这个卡。如果你有这个卡很好，如果你还没有的话，他就告诉你说你要去拿这个卡，然后一直到明年的1月1号，就等于说有6个月的时间，让大家知道这么一回事，然后可以准备去拿这个卡。
I won't spend a lot of time talking about SB 303, which is the corrective language for the law, but I just want to mention that in this same paper written by the California Directors of Environmental Health, what they are proposing is that between July 1st of 2011 and the end of December 2011, that people have a choice. They can either take a food handler card training from an American National Standards Institute accredited training provider that meets ASTM International 2659. Okay, now that training is what is proposed in the new amendment to the original law. It will set a standard for training. It doesn't mean the training is going to be more difficult or more complicated, but it sets a standard. And that is what is proposed in SB 303. The other choice you would have is to take a food protection manager certification the same people who provide the certified manager training would also be able to provide the food handler training.
这个就是加州环境卫生主管的联合会啊，他们现在就决定，就是说从7月1号到年底，大家可以去考这个加州食品卫生的许可卡，或者呢，它能够提供的几个呢，目前就是说它有3个机构可以提供，这3个 provider 是可以提供这个训练。那如果说等到那个 SB 303通过了之后呢，可能又有一些新的要求，会有点不太一样。那现在这3个是加州那个公共卫生局批准的，那就是一个是叫做 National Registry of Food Safety Professionals， 另外一个就是 ServSafe， 第3个是 Prometric。那这3个呢，其实都是原来提供那个食品安全经理训练的。所以如果说你有那个食品安全经理的证书的话，你就不需要来考这个食品安全的食品处理的许可卡。就是说你如果有那个卡，你就不需要这个卡。所以就是说你可以到那边去同样接受训练也可以的。
Okay. It's recommended, there's so much confusion between what may be passed into law with the amendment and what's currently as a law. So what I'm going to really concentrate on what is currently the law. We encourage everybody to start with the training, but you should be really careful about where you receive the training. Any training that you have your employees or your employees do engage in, it should be based on one of the 3 provider training organizations that Ms. Mu just referred to. So make sure of that, because there's a lot of unscrupulous people out there trying to just sell a certificate. You have to be real careful about who you get the training from, and inquire if it's based on one of these training providers. You don't want to have your employees spend money on a card that won't be acceptable. Any training you receive right now, your employees receive right now, that card is good for 3 years. So.
现在这个食品处理许可卡呢，一定要是这3家 provider 提供的才可以。那这个我放的这个网站呢，就是大家可以上网去做。那据我知道啊，第一个好像是收15块钱，第二个好像是12块9毛5或者什么，就是说你在网上可以做，可是它只有英文的。那你们也可以去，就是说有中国的那个，你问他说他有没有中文的训练。如果他是跟这3家有合约的话，他拿的那个训练的资料是这3家里面的1家的话，都可以，我们都承认。所以一定是要这3家，不要随便去 有的人就说他员工去拿了一个卡，可是回来之后不晓得那个到底合不合我们的规定。那我就说只能这3家的我们才承认，因为现在目前加州就是规定只有这3家可以算是被承认的。
I did want to make one point that our department does not regulate these training providers. We regulate food industry retail level, but we do not regulate the industry that provides the training. So just be very careful. If you ever have any questions, you can contact our office, and if you have a concern about a provider. And as well, our department does carry a list of training providers on our website. You can get There's a list. The people on our list on our website are not everybody that provides the training, but these are individuals who have contacted our department and filled out the application, which we review to make sure they have a legitimate product, and then we put it on our website. So it's not everybody, but it is people that we've had contact with. So you can look at that on our website.
好，除了这3家是我们能够接受的之外呢，另外你们在我们环境卫生的那个网站上，也可以看到我们有一个 providers list， 就是 certified food handler 的 providers list。那个上面的那些提供训练的呢，他们都是合格的。那你们可以跟他问说你是代理哪一家，那可以，也许他有中文的训练，那这样就比较方便啊。所以你们可以上我们的网站去说。等一下你们如果想知道那网站的话，等一下我再告诉大家。
Okay. I'll kind of go through some question and answers as we have them here. First of all, a lot of people are concerned about what types of businesses have to have this certificate. This is in the California Retail Food Code, so it's going to only be retail businesses, and it mainly focuses on restaurants. There's a lot of exemptions with this requirement. I'll give you some of the exemptions that are listed that don't need the certified food handler training. Are food handlers that are involved in temporary food facilities, for instance, temporary events where you have a food booth. They're not required to have it. Certified farmers markets. The vendors there do not have to have it. Commissaries. Commissary, it would be like for a retail food vehicle where they take their vehicle for servicing. Grocery stores, and that includes convenience stores, and it also includes food demonstrators within that grocery store. Licensed healthcare facilities, like hospitals and such. Mobile support units. Those are units that provide support to the catering vehicles. Now the catering vehicles would be required to have this certified food handler certificate, but the operation of the mobile support units would not be required. Okay, we have also retail stores where the majority of sales are from a pharmacy. There's certain food facilities with approved in-house training. Those we'll talk about a little bit later. And food facilities that are subject to collective bargaining agreements. Now that would be like a unionized store. They're exempt from having this requirement. Soup kitchens, food banks, whether you have a volunteer group of people who provide service either for the homeless or the elderly. And the reason that being is because you may have different employees every week. Well, employees, in other words, they're not employed, they volunteer their time. If it is a facility where the people are actually employed and it's a regular job, then they would be required to have it. They don't want to discourage volunteers.
好，至于哪一些人是不需要有这个食品处理许可卡的呢？一个就是临时的那些食品摊位。我们知道常常有时候好像中国新年或者中秋节的时候，我们不是会有一些活动吗？然后有那种临时摊位在那卖东西，那种就不需要。那另外就是农夫市场的不需要，还有 commissary 就是那些开着食物车子，他们要到那里去补充食物的那种也不需要。然后还有就是零售食品店，包括那些便利商店不需要。然后里面做 demonstration 就是有时候给人家试吃的，他们也不需要。还有就是健康 healthcare 就是那种健康中心的不需要。 然后还有 mobile support， 就是他们，例如说他们去给人家做 catering， 就是做那个外汇的这种，他们不需要。然后还有公立和私立学校的餐厅，或者是另外一些比较特别的食物处理的机构，还有 retail store， 他们主要是卖药品方面的，也不需要。然后另外还有就是那 union 是属于 union 的，不需要。那这些就说有很多情况是不需要。那其实最主要的，我觉得就是主要是餐厅的需要。
OK。
哦，对不起，还有一个就是那些志愿去帮忙的，例如在帮助那些穷的地方啊，他们志愿去帮忙的不需要。可是如果说他们是雇用的话，那就需要；如果他们只是去志愿帮忙的话，就不需要。
You already covered this one, huh?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, and where to get the food handler card? We did kind of cover that. There's a lot of providers. If you go to these websites, they may only offer the course in English, and that's an issue for a lot of people out there. But there are a lot of training providers that will take this exam and they'll do the training in the language of your choice. That's something you would need to get through a provider of these training companies. Because I'm sure that's an issue with a lot of people, is that their employees may not be able to speak the language or read the language of these websites here.
那个这些训练只有这3家公司，可是大家看到这个上网去考试或者训练的话，它就大部分只有英文，有的可能有西班牙文，可是没有中文的。那如果大家觉得说不方便的话，也许可以到那个普通，就是说经理他们去上课的那个地方呢，问问他们有没有这个食品处理许可卡的这个训练和考试，那他们可能会有，所以就比较方便，你可以选择你要去的地方。
There's also an issue with illiteracy. Maybe some of your employees can't read or write. That's another issue. But all accredited training providers, they must be in compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act, which would require them to provide a reasonable, appropriate accommodations for someone who can't read or write, meaning they would offer an oral examination and test. And of course, it has to be in a secure situation where they can do it orally and have it still be a legitimate exam.
还有一些人可能他不能写或者说不能读的话，也许他们可以，就说在美国有那种，就是等于说他们不方便去照平常的人量的话，他也许可以给他口头上的考试。那这个就是说，你可能要跟那个 provider 联络，看他们有没有提供这样子的训练。
Okay.
Do you want to cover who is?
Yes. Esther just made a good point. A lot of people have questions about which of their employees need to have this certificate. And in a restaurant setting, I'm afraid it's probably going to be all employees. I'll read a list of the types of positions that require a certified food handler certificate. It's the positions of wait staff, chefs, head cooks, bussers, people who bus the tables, bartenders, the hosts and hostesses, meaning the waiters and waitresses that handle food, beverage pourers, including alcoholic beverages, and supervisory personnel, such as the general manager or manager. The only exception with the managers is if they already have a manager training certificate, then they do not need to have a food handler certificate as well.
那我们也有很多人问说哪些人需要啊？那现在就是说他们这里有包括了，就是 wait staff， 就是包括你服务的那些人啊。我想就是把食物端给客人的 waiter 或 waitress 是需要的，还有厨师或者是大厨或者任何在厨房做事的，还有 busboy， 还有就是那个 bartender， 就是在酒廊服务的，还有那些 host of hostess，可能他们有时候也需要帮忙送一下菜或什么，那就需要。只要他会端到菜，或者说弄到什么东西，那就需要。还有帮人家倒饮料的，或者说倒酒的都需要。然后还有一些 supervisor， 就是他们是可以管其他的人。如果他们有服务，有端到盘子或者端到食物的话，他们就需要。除非他们已经有那个经理的证书，就不需要这个食物处理的许可卡。那这个是有点不一样，所以不管是拿薪水的，或者只是做几个钟头的，因为也有人问说，我只是在那个地方一个礼拜打工几个小时，我还需要吗？他也是需要的，就是说不论你做的时间长短，都是需要的。谢谢。
Okay. And in case anybody here also owns businesses in other counties, one point I did want to make is that although this is a statewide law, there are 3 counties that are exempted from requiring this, and that is San Bernardino County, Riverside County, and San Diego County. And the reason being is that they already had in place, when this law was passed, their own certificate program. There's no reciprocity, meaning you cannot take one of those certificates from that county and bring it to Los Angeles County. And likewise, you couldn't take the certificate that you receive anywhere else and bring it to those counties. So I just want to make that clear.
好，那在加州呢有三个 county 啊，就是 San Bernardino、Riverside 和 San Diego， 他们原来就有这个食物处理卡的要求。所以在他们那里，你如果要在他们那3个 county 做事的话，你要经过他们的考试拿到他们的卡。可是那个卡呢，就不能用在其他的县、其他的 county 就不行。那我知道有人说，我在 San Bernardino County 有一个卡，那我能不能到洛杉矶 County 来做？不行。可是你如果在洛杉矶 County 拿到的卡，你在加州其他的地方可以，除了那3个县之外。因为这个是加州要求的，所以你拿了这个卡之后，你是可以在加州其他的 county 都可以用，只除了那3个 county 之外。
可以再做这个3个 county。San
Bernardino、Riverside 和 San Diego。
Okay. The certified food handler certificate is not the responsibility of the business owner to pay for the employee. You certainly can if you choose to. It is the employee's responsibility to get it as the law is written.
好，这个就是你拿这个食品处理许可卡啊，老板并没有责任说要帮员工付钱，因为这是员工的责任。那如果说老板愿意帮他付钱的话，那是老板自己的决定啊。那因为有人就说，是不是我们要帮我们的员工付钱去上课？如果你愿意帮他付钱，可以，可是这并不是规定。那这是员工自己，因为员工将来他自己走了，如果他到别的地方去做事，他那个卡是跟着他的，并不是跟着老板的。
So whether the owner pays for the certificate training and test, or the employee pays for that certificate belongs to the employee, and if they happen to go to another restaurant, that goes with them. That they take it as their certificate. The owner is required to keep records. That's the responsibility of the owner, to be able to show when the inspector comes in the door to make an inspection, these are my employees, and they have their certificate. You're required to have record keeping where you can show that your employees have the certificate.
这个老板不需要替他们付钱，可是老板的责任呢，就是说确定你这些所有会处理到食物或者接触到食物的员工有那个卡。所以呢，你最好就是让那个员工能够给你一个 copy， 你收起来。那等到如果说卫生检查员去了，你至少可以秀给他看，这些是我们在这里做的，他们会处理食物的。那大家就那个检查员就可以知道说，哦，他们都有这些卡。所以老板的责任就是说，你要有一个记录就是了。你并不需要他们的那个卡放在你那里，就是给你一个 copy， 那你有记录说他们有，然后哪一天拿到的，因为这个是3年有效。 所以就从拿到的那天开始算3年是都可以有效的。
Okay. If you hire a new employee that doesn't have the certificate, the law gives you 30 days to have that person get their certificate. So if you hire a person on July 1st, you have 30 days from that date for them to get their certificate.
好，如果说你雇了一个员工，他还没有这个食品处理许可卡的话，我们通常是可以给30天去让他可以上课拿到这个卡。所以如果说你7月1号雇了一个员工，那通常就是你到7月底之前，他希望他能够拿到这个卡，这样你就有一个记录。所以老板就是注意你要保持一个记录就是了。
As a business owner, what kind of documentation do you need to keep? That's always a question that comes up. As an employer, you maintain the records documenting that each food handler employed by you has a valid food handler card, and you can keep lists of the employee. So when the inspector comes in, you have a list of your employees that they have the card, and it would be advisable to also keep a photocopy of that card. Now, the original card is held by the employee, but it would be good for you to have a copy of that so that when the inspector comes in, you can say, look, here's my employees, and here's copies of their cards.
好，老板就是说，你要把你的员工会处理到食物的员工的卡，能够最好是做一个 copy， 那你可以收起来，或者你有一个名单，有记录，就是说哪些人有，然后他的卡是哪一天给的什么。其实最好的办法，我觉得是 make a copy， 然后你放在一起，因为这样子检察员来的时候，你马上就可以秀给他们看。
Okay, and that card's good for 3 years. It doesn't matter where that employee works. Whatever restaurant they work in, that same card is valid.
好，那个卡是3年有效，所以不管他在哪里做，只要在这3年之内，他在哪一家餐馆做都可以。就是说有效期是3年，那到3年到的时候，你就要再去上课或者再去考试。
There are some large chain restaurants that have in-house training. There is actual list of facilities that have their in-house training is approved as is, and they can issue their own training certificate for their employees. As an example, McDonald's Corporation, they have their own in-house training where they provide the food handler training, but it's based on a training that was validated through the state of Florida. There's a list of restaurants that have this certification, just to let you know. So there are some companies that have approved in-house training, but that list is limited, and it's only those facilities that have had a previously approved training program.
有一些餐馆他们可以在他们自己餐馆里面有自己可以训练的课程。那这些餐馆呢，都是当初Florida 州批准的。那我们现在加州就是接受他们 Florida 州批准的这一些。那总共有37个不同的餐馆好像那个 McDonald、Burger King。还有像 Long John Silver 什么这几个，就是说有几个他们自己可以在他们里面做 training， 他们就可以给他们的人证书，就可以给他们那个卡。所以这些是 Florida 批准的，可是加州接受。所以这里有一些名单。那我想我们中国的大部分都是自己独立的餐厅，可能不是他这个连锁的店的。
Okay, as far as the training itself, I'll just go over some of the topics that a typical training will cover, which is the requirement of the California law, is that the training that's provided to the food handler covers these aspects. Foodborne illness, including terms of associated foodborne illness. This is foodborne illness, anything that would possibly cause foodborne illness with your food. They go over that. Relationship between time and temperature. In other words, how long can you keep a food product out of temperature, out of the refrigerator? Cooking temperatures that are proper to kill bacteria. The relationship between personal hygiene and food safety. It's basically washing your hands, keeping the equipment clean, and prevention methods for food contamination. How to properly handle food to keep it from becoming contaminated. and procedures for cleaning equipment and utensils, and also problems with and potential solutions with temperature control, cross-contamination, where you don't want raw meats contaminating foods that are ready to eat. These are all trainings that food handlers will help them actually do better work in your store, and that's the design. It's supposed to help the average food handler get a little bit better knowledge of keeping the food safe and protecting your customers.
好，那这个食品处理许可卡的考试啊，它的训练和考试需要包括下面这6个项目啊。第一个就是关于食物中毒的一些疾病，包括哪一些微生物、哪一些细菌、病菌会引起人生病，还有 A 型肝炎，还有就是哪一些食物可能会引起，就是说产生毒素，可能对人体造成有害的，或者是他们就说解释这些怎么会引起食物中毒的。那第二个就是时间和温度的控制。那这个呢，就是说，例如说你食物应该煮到什么样的温度，还有你食物如果没有保存在应该的温度的话，最高可以到多少个小时？那第三个就是个人卫生和食物安全，包括你的洗手啊，还有自己的一些个人的习惯啊。那第四个就是说，怎么样来保持食物不被别的各种情况污染？例如说，你收到食物的时候，你应该怎么样做，你食物不会被污染？还有包括说，不要从这个食物，好像你刚刚切完生肉，然后你过一下就去切生菜。你如果用同一个砧板的话，那个细菌就从生肉跑到生菜上去了。所以就是说这些情况它都要包括在这个里面。然后还有就是说怎么样清洗和杀菌，就是说你的所有的用具，好像你切完生肉的那个菜板，你要怎么样清洗和杀菌之后才能够再切别的东西。好，这些都有一些规定。然后另外还有就是怎么样避免说从这个食物污染到另外一个食物。好像有一些情况就是你这边放的水果，旁边放的生鸡肉，都在那个 walk-in 的冰箱里面。当你去拿生鸡肉的时候，万一有东西跑到那个水果上面，可能就把那个水果污染了。所以像这种情形的话，他们都要讲到这些。还有就是说你怎么样来保持你整个环境的整个那个屋里面环境的卫生和清洁。所以这些都是在包括在他那个训练课程里面应该要有的。
As a business owner, you have a lot on your mind, or a restaurant manager, you have a lot on your mind. You have to worry about having food for the next day, making your orders, paying your vendors, paying your employees, payroll taxes, taxes on your sales, all kinds of worries you have. You can't possibly watch everything that your employees are doing. If your employees have a little bit better knowledge, they will do a better job for you, I think, in the long run. It's kind of right now everyone's frantic about getting these certificates, but I think in the long run, if you look at it in the sense that your employees will have a little bit better knowledge, I think it'll help you. You have possibly less issues with the food. You want to protect your customers, and in the long run, I think it'll work out good.
那现在我知道所有的雇主哦，你们又要付这个税，又要关心这件事那件事，很多事情需要操心。可是呢，你的员工如果说有接受这一个训练的话呢，将来他们就知道怎么样来处理食物，所以长远来看呢是有帮助。因为那些员工就比较了解说，哦，我为什么不能这么做？因为以我个人的经验呢，以前我去餐馆检查的时候，有一次我就看到一个人坐在一袋米上面，坐在地上，在那边弄青菜，结果我就跟他们老板说，你看看他坐在一袋米上面，坐在地上，然后在那边弄青菜。他说，哎呀，他是新来的，他不懂。这个不是理由。因为我们每一个人他们该做什么事，他们应该自己知道。所以这些人如果他有经过训练的话，他有这些基本的食品安全的概念的话，他就不会去做这些事情。所以长远看来，就说你的员工去经过这些训练之后，是对雇主是有益的。所以这是为什么加州那时候他们通过这个法律，我想他们也是看长远的来说。
Not the question and answers.
好，现在大家如果有什么问题可以提出来。
Do they have the Chinese program and the Chinese test?
There's not the tests that come from these companies are not in any language other than English. I think some of them offer it in Spanish, but the training providers that purchase these exams from these training companies, they can provide it in any language that's needed. Some of the providers on our list, if you look, it'll specify they do Korean language, Chinese, Spanish, English, and I'm not sure other languages. They can provide the training in another language, but that's per provider, if the provider offers that language.
OK， 他刚刚问的就是说，这些训练有没有都是英文的吗？就是说，如果这3家你们上网的话，可能只有英文和西班牙文。那可是呢，就是说在我们的网站上，我们有一些 providers list。那这些人呢，你们看，如果它上面有写说 Chinese 或是 Mandarin 或者 Cantonese， 你可以打电话去问说他们有没有提供这样的训练和考试。也许他们已经有买了他们的资料，把它翻译成中文，那你就可以知道有没有可能去拿到他们的训练。对。
所以2个星期以后会有中文。
哦 ，ServSafe 2个礼拜以后就会有中文。This is ServSafe. After 2 weeks, they are going to have Chinese.
Good.
Okay, I actually have 2 sets of questions.
Okay.
First set is regarding enforcement. I understand from July to January of next year, it will be kind of a quote-unquote grace period. After January of next year, if a inspector goes to a restaurant and the owner cannot provide the individual food handling tax, or less than if the restaurant owner doesn't have a card for everybody, who will be fined and how much will the fine be?
Well, we wouldn't issue any fines after January 1st. The proposal is that after January 1st, we would be looking for the cards and taking enforcement action. The enforcement action would be, we would put it on the inspection report. We would give you a set time, probably 30 days, to get the certificate for that employee. And it may, in Los Angeles County, it may be a point deduction off of your grade. That hasn't been settled yet because currently on our inspection report there is no category for checking that off.
So in other words, to confirm, there's no money fine and possibly a point off?
At this point, no, there isn't. What you refer to as like a grace period, that's been a suggestion of our California directors of environmental health, is that each jurisdiction take, not that they ignore it, the law, but they take the law and they use it as an educational portion where we would write it on the report and notate you need to have it and what the requirements are. And instead of taking a further enforcement action, we would give you that time to take care of it. But that's going to be up to each jurisdiction. Each county would have to make that point. But that is what is recommended by the California Conference of Directors. And these are the directors that run each individual jurisdiction.
And I'm talking about January, after January of next year. Mm-hmm. My question is on the quote-unquote fine or enforcement penalty. Mm-hmm. So to confirm my understanding, there will be no money fine, but it would be an imposition on the operator to come up with the license of each employee within 30 days. And if not, there may be a point fine. Is that?
I can't specify, and I can only answer for Los Angeles County, but I can't specify what kind of point value, because as you know, when we make an inspection, we deduct points, and that ends up, you get so many points deducted off from 100, and that's what you end up with your grade. I can't say for sure right now what that point deduction would be because we haven't set that yet. Our inspection form that we currently use doesn't have a section for that.
Okay, after Esther translates, I have another question.
Okay.
Okay, 刚刚他问的就是说，从今年7月1号到年底啊，就到明年1月1号，就等于说我们让大家有一段时间可以知道这个规定和哪里去拿这个卡。那到了1月1号以后呢，会怎么样？他说有没有罚款？ 现在目前是没有罚款，可是可能会被扣分，然后可能会给你们30天，说让你的员工去拿到这个卡，所以扣分现在我们也不知道到底是会扣几分，就说可能就是变成说被 mark 说没有这个，然后他可能给你30天去拿，然后可能会扣一个什么分数，所以就说如果到明年1月1号之后，最好能够有这个卡，然后能够老板都有一个记录。
Per your conversation, it doesn't mean in the other world haven't yet to set up the charge for the penalty, right? But might be during these 6 months will be set up the penalty, right? Will be set out the fine.
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking about whether we will charge a fine of some kind?
So maybe it will be changed, right?
Yeah, I can't say that we'll, I mean, there's not a fine attached. When we make an inspection of your food business, we don't attach fines to the violations we write. We require that they are corrected. And also, if it's serious enough, we would close the restaurant facility down. And thirdly, it's a point deduction, and the incentive is if you want a certain grade category, you want to make sure that you keep everything at a certain level. We don't currently charge a fine just based on inspections that we make.
刚刚他在讲说会不会处罚，就是说罚款啊？那目前是不会，因为我们通常检查只是说如果没有做到的话，我们会扣分，对不对？然后你的整个分数就会被扣掉多少？当然目前还是这样子。那他本来是说会不会这6个月之间突然又有新的法律，就说会罚款了？那目前都还没有这样子的。那我想我们老板是说可能不会说罚款，可能只是扣分。
然后严重者就关门。
如果说有很严重的情况的话，可能会被关门。例如说他有卡，可是他做的事情全部都不对的话，我想这样子可能有被关门的可能。不过我是希望说，大家上完这个课之后都知道自己该做什么，所以就不会做错。那因为我知道以前我检查的时候，我常常看到有一些人，他们看到我进去，他们就把东西赶快放到冰箱里，结果放错地方。本来他不放可能还没有错的这么厉害，结果他放错地方，结果变错了，就被扣分，扣的还更多。所以就说我们希望说他们上了这个课之后呢，他就有一个概念，他知道应该怎么做才对。所以这是我们的希望。Yes。
我有个问题就是说，要拿那个食谱卡的人，一般餐厅里面有3种人，需不需要拿？一个机客。一个是铁事，一个是在洗那个
洗碗的
那个洗碗的那个，
对
，3种人需不需要拿
？OK， 说起来这个洗碗的啊，除非你确定，就说你不会，有的人啊，就说他在洗碗，可是有时候忙的时候，老板可能说，刚好送货来，你把那个货帮我搬到冰箱里面去，那这样子他就变成是有接触到食物了。所以我觉得就说保险起见，还是让他拿一个比较好，这是我的感觉。因为现在人手有时候可能一忙起来的时候，也许就说，你把这个东西搬到那边去，或者把这个东西放到上面去。如果这样，那可是如果说他决定不会接触到任何食物，那可以。还有另外一个你说是什么？
还有一个是铁事，收银的。
收银的，如果说他决定不会接触到任何食物，如果说有人倒了一杯饮料，他把饮料递给客人，这样变成他接触到食物。你刚刚第一个说的是什么？
就是机客。代位的，如果好，代位的，
如果他不会接触到任何食物的话，就不需要。可是如果说他有的时候一忙起来，他可能帮人家端个食物或什么，那就需要。就是说你看那个人会不会有可能接触到食物？好。He was asking like who some of the situation were there.
Oh, okay.
How many days or how many hours for the program they drop if they want to take the training?
For the training?
Yeah.
The state is, the code requires that the training to be about 2.5 hours, training and test. It doesn't specify this amount of time for training and this amount of time. Basically 2 to 2.5 hours.
这个训练的和考试啊，大概就是2个小时，2个半小时，就是包括训练和考试。就说这个是加州的法律大概规定是这样子，所以通常不是太久。
我有个问题啊，因为我是在教这个卫生课的，那很多人问我说，现在这个可以上网去读，还有上网考试。现在好像在传这个，不知道卫生局有没有这个规定，现在可以上，或者已经有被批准了。
这些就是可以上网考试和上网上课的。
他们都是有 OK。
对。
To follow up the question on that one, somebody, I think Vincent just mentioned one of the 3 websites, they provide Chinese lessons. So, in other words, a lot of restaurant owners have been asking me about the cost of it, and I think to recap the conversation for some of them who didn't arrive earlier. These 3 websites, per my understanding of your lecture, they said they would only charge about $15 to $25, right? So in other words, if one of them provide the Chinese classes, then the restaurant owners doesn't have to have the employees pay $200 or whatever to go through another company.
Well, yeah, and I guess they're offering it, and I guess my understanding is the next couple of days. The last I checked, they didn't have the Chinese language on their website, but obviously that may change. And they can take it directly through these organizations, and whatever that organization charges, I think it is somewhere between $15 and $25. Okay. A provider that will have a classroom setting where they do the training and they also proctor the test, they charge a whole range of fees for each person, and because we don't regulate the industry,
I understand.
They can charge. Yeah, it's their choice, really.
If they go through these 3 with the Chinese classes, it would be less than $20 or so.
It may be, yeah. That may be very well true.
这三家的训练的啊，他们收费大概是15到25块钱之间。那至于其他的，有一些他们开了训练，然后考试也有人在那里做考试的话，他们可能收的比较贵。可是这一家，我们刚刚听到Vincent说，这一家再过2个礼拜就会有中文的训练和考试的。所以如果你会上网的话，你就可以到那里去上网拿到那个食品处理许可证、许可卡，这样你就不需要去花很多的钱去拿。
这个培训是上网的一种渠道吗？还是说也有面对面的培训？
也有，就是你如果到别的地方去上课的话，就是我们这 providers list 上，如果说有中文的话，我知道有一些他们也有提供一些训练，可能他们就不只是收15到25块，因为他们要翻译所有的资料，然后准备，然后又有教室给大家上课，可能他们收费稍微贵一点，可是也有这样子的，据我知道是有。
参加这个考试的资格是都需要有工卡吗？
不是，
跟那没关系。
这个跟工卡没有关系。上一次韩国的那个媒体访问我，就说，那是不是你们去了，你们都会检查人家有没有那个移民的许可，是不是合法的移民？我说那个不关我们的事，我们其实只要看你有没有这个食物处理的许可卡就好，所以这个跟工卡没有关系的。